you double." The mocking laughter of manager Thomas Richardson echoed through the marble halls of Premier Trust Bank in Manhattan. In front of him stood a 14-year-old girl, calm, steady, and far more confident than he expected. "Are you sure you're in the right place, kid? The community branch is 3 blocks down," he sneered. Jasmine Williams didn't move. She'd rehearsed this moment the entire subway ride. At just 14, she knew exactly what she was doing, and this visit was only the first step in a much bigger plan. "I'd like to open a premium checking account," she said clearly, placing her school ID on the counter. "And I'd like to deposit this." She slid a $50,000 check forward. Thomas raised an eyebrow, half smiling. "Sweetheart, that's cute. Is this some kind of school project?" "You can verify it," Jasmine replied softly. Now the room had gone quiet. Other customers turned their heads. A well-dressed woman in line whispered, "That's exactly why kids shouldn't play with grown-up money." For 15 years, Thomas Richardson had managed the most prestigious branch of Premier Trust. His family had been in banking for 3 generations. His MBA and network made him feel untouchable. And now a teenager was challenging that image, with a check he was certain had to be fake. He leaned closer, voice low. "Listen carefully. Bank fraud is a serious offense. I'll have to call security." But Jasmine didn't flinch. Over the past 3 months, ever since her father, David Williams, had taken over as CEO of Premier Trust, she had learned exactly how people reveal who they truly are when they think no one important is watching. And today, that lesson was about to come full circle. 2 weeks earlier, during a quiet dinner meeting, Jasmine's father had shared something that troubled him deeply. "I've been getting reports about racial bias at some of our branches," he said, his tone heavy with concern. "I need to see this for myself." Jasmine, always quick thinking and strategic beyond her years, spoke up. "Dad, let me try something. I'll go in as a regular customer. No one will suspect a thing." Her father hesitated. The idea of his 14-year-old daughter facing discrimination made his stomach turn. But Jasmine was determined. Someone has to show the truth. And if it's real, people need to see it. Now, standing inside the marble-floored branch, she watched as manager Thomas Richardson gestured sharply to a security guard. "Mike, we've got a situation. Possible fraud. Keep the girl here while I call the police." A gray-haired customer nearby, Mr. Patterson, nodded approvingly. "That's right, Thomas. We can't have this kind of thing in our bank." Jasmine remained calm, unnervingly calm. She had predicted every reaction, every dismissive tone, every insult disguised as policy. Quietly, she tapped her smartwatch, the one her father had given her. It wasn't just a watch. It was recording everything, every sneer, every arrogant glance, every word. Thomas Richardson, Jennifer Morrison, Mr. Patterson, Mike the guard, she noted silently. Each name would matter when the truth came out. "The check is from my father," Jasmine said, steady as ever. "It was an early birthday gift. His name is Williams." Thomas froze, just for a second. A flicker of recognition crossed his face before he smirked again. "Of course it is," he said mockingly, "and I'm the cousin of the bank president." What he didn't know was that the president, David Williams, was sitting just 2 blocks away in a nearby cafe, watching everything unfold live through Jasmine's smartwatch. Beside him sat Margaret Chun, head of human resources, and Robert Martinez, the bank's chief legal counsel. Their expressions hardening as every word, every act of arrogance was recorded for evidence. Mike, the security guard, was already making his way over when Jennifer Morrison decided to add her own venom to the scene. "Honestly," she said with a disdainful laugh, "some people just think they can walk in anywhere. No manners, no class. It's pathetic." Jasmine didn't even blink. Her voice stayed calm, her tone steady. That same quiet dignity that seemed to irritate Thomas Richardson more than anything else. "Gentlemen," she said, her eyes fixed on his, "are you sure you want to continue with this?" There was something about her gaze, a spark of confidence, a trace of secret knowledge, that made Thomas hesitate for just half a second. But pride is a powerful thing. He had gone too far to stop now. "Absolutely," Thomas said sharply, grabbing the phone. "Hello, police. I've got a minor here attempting to deposit a fraudulent check for $50,000. Yes, I'll keep her here until you arrive. Jasmine allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Not one of fear, not even defiance. It was the smile of someone who knew the trap had just closed, and not around her. As Thomas played the role of righteous manager, as Jennifer whispered more poison and Mr. Patterson nodded along, as Mike blocked the door like she was some dangerous criminal, Jasmine stood perfectly still. In that stillness, she thought of every other kid who had faced the same kind of silent cruelty. The ones who'd been dismissed, humiliated, treated as less than human. But today wasn't going to be another quiet injustice swept under the rug. Today, justice would have a name, a face, and a plan, hers. 3 minutes later, 2 NYPD cars rolled up outside Premier Trust Bank. Officers Reynolds and Kowalski stepped inside, wearing the weary expressions of men who'd already seen too much nonsense that day. "Someone called in a fraud report?" Officer Reynolds asked, scanning the room. Thomas practically rushed toward the officers the moment they stepped inside. His posture shifted, false authority replacing the nervous energy beneath his polished suit. "Officers, thank you for getting here so quickly," he said with theatrical seriousness, pointing at Jasmine like she was evidence in a courtroom. "This minor attempted to deposit a fraudulent check for $50,000. Officer Kowalski glanced from Thomas to Jasmine. "Does she have identification?" "Yes," Jasmine replied evenly. "I have my school ID and my passport, and the check is legitimate. It was issued by my father, David Williams, from his account at this very bank." Officer Reynolds examined the documents, while Kowalski logged into the system using Thomas's credentials. For a moment, Thomas stood tall, arms crossed, radiating smug certainty. But that confidence began to falter when he saw the officer's brow tighten. "Mr. Richardson," Kowalski said quietly, "the check seems legitimate. Active account. Funds available." Thomas's stomach dropped. "That's, impossible," he muttered, snatching the tablet with trembling hands. He typed furiously, and then froze. There it was. David Williams, CEO of Premier Trust. Authorized transfer to Jasmine Williams' daughter. The color drained from his face. Nearby, Jennifer Morrison, still eager for a scandal, leaned forward. "What is it, Thomas? Don't tell me she managed to fake your system too?" But before Thomas could respond, Jasmine's calm voice broke through the tense silence. "Gentlemen," she said, her tone steady but piercing, "would you like to know why I'm really here today?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Thomas looked up from the screen, his lips parting as the blood drained from his face. "3 months ago," Jasmine began, "my father took over as CEO of this bank, and one of the first things he noticed were hundreds of complaints, all describing the same thing: racial discrimination at different branches." For a moment, her mind flashed back to that night, her father sitting in his home office, surrounded by files, his expression heavy with disappointment and anger. "Look at this, Jazz," he had said, handing her a stack of letters. "Customers treated like suspects just because of their skin color. A woman accused of using a stolen card. Teenagers searched by security for no reason. And people being escorted out, simply for walking into a branch." Now, standing in that same institution, Jasmine faced the very people her father had been fighting to protect his customers from. And this time, every second of it was on record. "Dad, you need to see this for yourself," Jasmine had told him weeks earlier. That single sentence had set everything in motion. Now, standing in the middle of the branch, she took a deep breath and continued, her voice clear and steady. "For the past 6 weeks, I've visited 12 Premier Trust branches. 6 treated me like any other customer. But the other 6, including this one, treated me exactly as you just did." Officer Reynolds folded his arms, his expression sharpening with interest. "Go on," he said quietly. "This is ridiculous," Thomas snapped. "I followed protocol, standard security measures." "Interesting," Jasmine interrupted, her calm tone slicing through his excuses. "Because yesterday, my friend Chelsea, she's white, the same age as me, dressed almost exactly the same, came into this very branch to deposit a check for $40,000. The room went completely still. "Do you know how you treated her, Mr. Richardson?" Thomas didn't answer. His silence said everything. She recorded everything too, Jasmine continued, tapping lightly on her smartwatch. You processed her check in under 10 minutes. You offered her coffee. You called her miss. You never asked for extra ID. You didn't call security. And you definitely didn't call the police. The words hit like a thunderclap. Jennifer Morrison took an instinctive step backward, realizing the full weight of what she had just been part of. Mr. Patterson tried to slip toward the door, but Mike, the same security guard who'd stood so confidently moments before, shifted accidentally, blocking his escape. Do you know the difference between me and Chelsea? Jasmine asked softly. Her voice wasn't angry. It was heartbreakingly calm. She's white. I'm black. Same age. Same bank. Same type of transaction. But completely different treatment. Thomas's face had gone pale. Sweat rolled down his temples as he stammered, I didn't discriminate against anyone. It was just standard procedure. Then came a firm, commanding voice from the doorway. Lies! Every head turned. Standing at the entrance was David Williams, CEO of Premier Trust, immaculate in his tailored suit, flanked by Margaret Chen from Human Resources and Robert Martinez, the bank's general counsel. The room fell silent. Dad, Jasmine said softly, a small, proud smile spreading across her face. Thomas's expression collapsed, his skin drained of color. Jennifer Morrison gasped audibly, and Mr. Patterson looked as if he wanted to vanish into the wall. The balance of power had shifted completely, and for the first time in that room, everyone understood. This wasn't just a lesson, it was a reckoning. Mr. Williams, Thomas stammered, extending a trembling hand. I didn't know she was your daughter. If I had known... Exactly, David interrupted, his voice calm but cutting like glass. If you had known, you would have treated her with respect. But when it was an unknown black girl, she became suspicious by default. Margaret Chun stepped forward, unlocking her tablet and turning it toward him. We have it all recorded, she said coldly. Every word, every look, every act of discrimination. Robert Martinez, the bank's general counsel, addressed the officers firmly. Officers Reynolds, Kowalski, thank you for responding. As you can see, this wasn't a case of fraud. It was a controlled social experiment to expose discriminatory behavior within our own branches. Officer Reynolds turned to Jasmine, his expression shifting from authority to admiration. Smart, he said quietly, and brave. Thomas was pale, his voice cracking. Mr. Williams, please. Let me explain. I was only trying to protect the bank. Protect it? David interrupted, his composure never wavering. You've done the opposite. You've destroyed its reputation. You've exposed this institution to lawsuits, to public outrage, and you violated federal civil rights by profiling my daughter solely because of her skin color. Behind him, Jennifer Morrison began to cry quietly. Her earlier arrogance was gone, replaced by the weight of realization that every cruel comment she'd made was on record. David placed a steady hand on Jasmine's shoulder, his eyes filled with pride. My daughter, he said, has just documented a pattern of discrimination that will help me rebuild this bank from the inside out. We will make sure no one else ever experiences what she did today. Jasmine turned to Thomas, her tone still calm, but now edged with unmistakable strength. You once told me that if I had equity, you'd pay me double, remember? Thomas didn't answer. His lips trembled. Well, Jasmine continued, her gaze unwavering, technically I have a lot more than equity. My father owns 30% of this bank. The irony hit the room like a silent explosion. The man who had mocked a young girl for not belonging now stood before the family that owned the institution itself. And now, Jasmine said, her voice firm, resonant, and final, you're about to learn that discrimination comes with a cost, one far higher than $50,000. Thomas sank into a nearby chair, the reality of his ruined career crashing down like a tidal wave. The officers exchanged glances, silent witnesses to a justice far greater than they'd expected to see that morning. And as Jasmine stood beside her father, head held high, the meaning was clear. Respect is earned through integrity, not status. And truth, once revealed, changes everything. Jennifer tried to whisper an apology, but the words caught in her throat when she saw the expression on Margaret Chen's face. The HR director wasn't angry. She was calculating. Every glance, every note in her tablet said the same thing. Lawsuits, firings, consequences. Mike, the security guard, who had stood like a wall minutes earlier, now looked as if he wanted to melt into the floor. And Mr. Patterson, who had proudly spoken about protecting the institution, was pale and trembling, realizing just how quickly the tables had turned. But what none of them knew yet was that Jasmine hadn't only collected proof of discrimination. Over the past 6 weeks, she had uncovered something much bigger, a pattern connecting this branch to 6 others. A pattern that would expose not just individual prejudice, but a coordinated system of corruption and bias hiding behind the language of policy. And while Thomas and the others were still reeling from the shock of who she really was, the 14-year-old was already several steps ahead, because Jasmine held one final secret, one that would turn a personal victory into a nationwide reckoning, something that could change not just this branch, but the entire American banking system. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't simply exposing the prejudiced, it's using their own arrogance to dismantle the very system that allowed discrimination to exist in the first place. "Wait!" Thomas shouted suddenly, springing to his feet. His voice wavered between panic and anger. "I demand to speak to my lawyer. This is a trap, a setup to destroy me." David Williams looked at him steadily, his tone measured but unyielding. "Mr. Richardson, you have every right to legal counsel," he said, "and I strongly recommend that you use it immediately." Just then the glass doors opened. A woman entered, composed, professional, carrying a press badge that made everyone freeze. Catherine Brooks, investigative reporter for the New York Times, followed by a small camera crew. Jasmine had timed it perfectly. "Mr. Williams," Catherine greeted, shaking his hand. "As agreed, we're here to document the results of your internal investigation into systemic bias." Jennifer Morrison gasped. "Wait, are you filming this? Is this going to be in the paper?" "Not just the Times," Jasmine replied calmly, lifting her tablet and tapping the screen. The feed from her smartwatch blinked to life, broadcasting live. Dozens of comments began to flood in. Finally, someone showing the truth. "This girl is fearless. This is what accountability looks like." The branch, once filled with arrogance and condescension, now stood silent, a courtroom without walls. And in that silence, the world began to watch. For 6 long weeks, Jasmine had quietly built a case. Every branch visit, every comment, every humiliating pause had been recorded and logged. Now she opened a digital folder on her tablet, and Thomas instinctively stepped back. On the screen appeared dozens of videos, neatly organized by date and location. The Brooklyn branch refused to process my check without calling in a gang verification, Jasmine narrated steadily. At the Queens branch, security was summoned before I even reached the counter. "That proves nothing," Thomas snapped, though his voice shook. "Those were isolated misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. It was Victoria Chun, branch manager from Queens, and one of the few minority leaders in the company. She had been part of Jasmine's plan from the start. "Mr. Richardson," she said, her tone razor sharp, "I heard your training sessions myself. You told new employees to observe clothing and body language. You said certain profiles required extra verification." Thomas's face drained of color. "I also have emails," Victoria continued, stepping forward and handing a small flash drive to David Williams. "Internal messages where branch managers discussed filtering out undesirable clientele. Even memos labeled maintaining institutional standards." Margaret Chen, the HR director, accepted the drive with trembling hands. She knew what that meant. Evidence of systemic discrimination, enough to trigger multi-million-dollar federal lawsuits. Across the room, Mr. Patterson tried to sneak toward the door, but Catherine Brooks, the New York Times reporter, intercepted him, microphone in hand. "Mr. Patterson," she said smoothly, "you've been a customer here since 1994, correct? Would you like to comment on your earlier statement that certain elements don't belong in this institution?" I was joking," he stammered. "It was taken out of context." Jasmine watched it all with calm precision, every move unfolding exactly as she'd planned. Months of strategy, coordination, and quiet courage were finally converging. But she wasn't finished yet. "Dad," she said softly, turning to David, "there's one more thing I need to show you." David looked at her with a mixture of pride and curiosity. His 14-year-old daughter had just conducted an investigation worthy of a federal task force, and yet her eyes said there was still more to come. The room went silent again. Everyone waited for Jasmine's next move. Jasmine opened another folder on her tablet. "While I was documenting discrimination," she said, "I found something much bigger." She looked at the room. "Remember how Chelsea was treated yesterday?" Heads nodded, still shaken by the contrast. "Not only did you treat her with respect," Jasmine continued, "Mr. Richardson, you offered her high-risk investments without warning her about the risks. She let that hang for a beat. Investments for which you received undeclared commissions." Thomas's face drained of color. "You can't prove that." Jasmine tapped the screen and hit play. Thomas's voice filled the branch. "Between you and me, honey, these investments pay generous commissions that don't show up on my official salary." Wink, wink. Robert Martinez pressed his lips together, eyes closing for a moment. Financial misconduct stacked on top of racial bias. This was now the kind of case that invited federal scrutiny. Jennifer Morrison's expression shifted as realization hit. "You said Chelsea came yesterday?" she asked. "Exactly. And last week at the Bronx branch, it was your cousin Diego. 2 weeks ago, your Aunt Rachel. Different faces, same result." A small, almost ironic smile crossed Jasmine's face. "My family is diverse, very useful for social experiments," Victoria added, stepping forward. She confirmed everything Jasmine had found. Managers coached to profile customers, minority clients steered toward worse products, and a parallel commission scheme running beneath official records. Mike, the security guard, finally spoke, voice cracking. "I was just following orders. Thomas told me to watch certain customers more closely." "Shut up," Thomas snapped, losing the last shreds of composure. "You're going to sink us all." Catherine Brooks kept filming. This wasn't just a story about discriminatory treatment anymore. It was an expose of systemic corruption. David took a slow breath. "How many people are involved?" 19 employees across 6 branches, Jasmine replied, all documented, all with irrefutable evidence. Officer Reynolds let out a low whistle and grinned. "Girl, you've got a future in the FBI." But Jasmine wasn't finished. "There's one more thing I discovered," she said softly, "something that connects all these branches in a way no one could have imagined." The entire room turned toward her. The air went still. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed to pause. "In the next 48 hours, Jasmine continued, her voice calm yet cutting, "you'll see that what happened here wasn't random. It was systematic, coordinated, and," she paused, "profitable." Thomas collapsed into his chair, his eyes wide. Jennifer was crying openly now. Mr. Patterson looked like he might faint. David turned to his daughter, torn between pride and worry. "Jazz, what else did you find?" Jasmine tapped the final folder on her tablet, but didn't open it. "That, Dad," she said evenly, "you'll see along with the rest of the country tomorrow morning, when this story breaks on every news channel, every newspaper, and every social feed." She looked straight at Thomas. "You laughed at me, Mr. Richardson. You said that if I had a balance, you'd pay double. Well, get ready to pay a lot more than that. You and everyone who turned prejudice into policy." Justice wasn't just being served, it was being documented, broadcast, and ready to ignite the biggest banking scandal of the decade. All because one 14-year-old girl had the courage to walk into a bank and let injustice expose itself. But even then, no one in that room knew the story wasn't over, because the person truly behind the scheme hadn't yet been revealed. And when that name came out, even Jasmine hadn't seen it coming. She opened the final audio file. The moment she pressed play, a man's voice echoed through the branch speakers, calm, confident, and unmistakable. "Thomas, do you understand the guidelines? Black and Latino customers receive low-yield products. That's how we keep our clientele premium. Understood?" The room froze. It was Gregory Foster, the regional vice president of Premier Trust, the man who oversaw every one of the 6 branches Jasmine had investigated. The silence that followed was absolute. And in that silence, everyone realized the truth. This wasn't just one manager's prejudice. It was a system, and Jasmine Williams had just exposed it to the world. Thomas's face turned ghost white. Jennifer Morrison gasped. It wasn't just prejudice anymore. It was corporate policy. There's more, Jasmine said, tapping the next file. Gregory Foster's voice filled the air again. Your bonuses depend on filtering properly. Understand? We want white money in this bank. The words hung in the air like poison. Margaret Chun, the head of HR, dropped her tablet in shock. Robert Martinez, the bank's lawyer, whispered, My God. This is federal-level systemic discrimination. Jasmine remained calm. Over the past 6 weeks, I've documented 47 recorded conversations between Mr. Foster and branch managers, all coordinating explicit bias, secret commission schemes, and fraudulent investment practices. Thomas, desperate, tried one last time to save himself. She's lying. This is a setup. But Victoria Chun stepped forward. No, Thomas, I recorded it too. Remember when you offered me a bonus for discouraging clients from certain communities? The doors to the branch burst open. Gregory Foster himself stormed in. Immaculate suit, perfect hair, and an expression somewhere between fury and panic. David, he exclaimed, forcing a smile. What a surprise. Can we speak in private? David Williams met his gaze coldly. No, Gregory, we'll do this right here, in front of the cameras. Only then did Foster notice Catherine Brooks and the New York Times crew filming every second. His bravado vanished. Those recordings, I can explain, he stammered. They were taken out of context. Jasmine's voice cut through the air like a blade. Really? And how exactly is "we want white money in this bank" taken out of context, Mr. Foster? He turned to her, confused. Who are you, child? This is adult business. She's my daughter, David said firmly, and the bravest person I know. While you were building your empire of discrimination, she was dismantling it, one recording at a time. Foster froze. The realization hit him like a train. The very girl he had ordered his staff to screen out was the CEO's daughter. No, he muttered, shaking his head. This can't be happening. It is happening, said Robert Martinez, opening his briefcase. I have 89 pages of evidence, and every one of them leads straight to you. The cameras rolled. The crowd outside the bank began to gather. And as Gregory Foster's empire began to crumble, one truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just about one girl or one bank. It was about a system built on arrogance and the courage it took to tear it down. Recordings, emails, witnesses, civil rights violations, bank fraud, conspiracy to discriminate. David's voice was calm, steady, devastating. You're finished, Foster. Thomas collapsed to his knees, tears streaking his face. I was just following orders, he sobbed. Foster told me to. I have a family. Jasmine looked at him gently, but without pity. You had a choice, she said softly. Just like everyone who looked at me today and decided I didn't belong. Every person you humiliated could have chosen respect. Jennifer Morrison stepped forward hesitantly. Please, I have children. I didn't know who you were. That's exactly the problem, Jasmine replied. You only show respect to people you think matter. But dignity shouldn't depend on who someone is. It should come from who you are. David turned to Foster. Your contract has a just cause termination clause. Racial discrimination qualifies. No severance. No recommendations. No pension. In a matter of seconds, Gregory Foster's transformation from untouchable executive to disgraced man was complete. He looked around helplessly, employees avoiding his eyes, customers recording with their phones, the empire he had built collapsing around him. Please, Foster whispered. Everything I built, you built it on the pain of others, Jasmine said quietly, and now you're seeing what that costs. David faced the stunned staff. Every one of you had a choice today. Some chose empathy. Others chose arrogance. The consequences will match those choices. Thomas, Jennifer, Mike the security guard, and Mr. Patterson all faced not only dismissal, but full legal investigations. Their careers, reputations, and futures were unraveling before the cameras. But the most haunting moment was Foster's face, realizing that his downfall had come from a 14-year-old girl with nothing but courage, intelligence, and integrity. "How could you?" Foster stammered. "You're just a kid." "I'm not a kid," Jasmine replied firmly. "I'm Jasmine Williams, and you underestimated what happens when someone stands up for justice." As the officers led Foster and Thomas away, flashes from cameras filled the air, capturing the moment arrogance met accountability. And through that silence, one truth rang louder than any headline. Arrogance has a price, and today that price was paid publicly, painfully, and permanently. 6 months later, the Premier Trust branch in downtown Manhattan looked completely different. New management, new policies, new faces. And framed on the wall, next to the bank's new mission statement, hung a photo of a young girl in a school uniform, smiling confidently. 6 months later, Premier Trust was unrecognizable. Victoria Chun now led the region as manager, implementing bold inclusion programs that soon became a national model for fairness in banking. At just 15 years old, Jasmine Williams had become the youngest voice in America's financial justice movement. Her TEDx talk on the systemic inequality surpassed 12 million views, inspiring an entire generation. Harvard had already sent her a letter of early admission. Meanwhile, Gregory Foster faced 23 federal charges. His penthouse was sold to pay his legal fees, his family left him, and the man who once demanded premium clients only was now working as an assistant in an accounting firm, earning less than the customers he once despised. Thomas Richardson lost everything: his home, his car, his career. No bank would hire him again. He now worked in telemarketing, listening to the sound of phones clicking off, a bitter echo of how he once dismissed others. Jennifer Morrison moved to another state, but her face remained infamous. Every job interview ended the same way. "Wait, aren't you the woman from that discrimination video?" Premier Trust itself paid $47 million in settlements to affected clients. But the real change wasn't in the money, it was in the culture. More than 800 employees were retrained or replaced. For the first time, new hires were chosen not for appearances, but for integrity. David Williams became a leading voice for banking reform, using his daughter's courage as the spark that ignited national change. Within a year, 3 U.S. states passed new Jasmine Williams laws, designed to end discrimination in financial institutions once and for all. But Jasmine herself, she never changed. She still wore simple clothes, still took the subway, still greeted people with kindness. No titles, no judgment. Because she'd learned that true power isn't about control, it's about character. In her final interview, she said it best: "He tried to diminish me, but I used his arrogance as fuel to set fire to an entire system built on injustice." And somewhere, in a dim apartment, Gregory Foster watched that interview, tears running down his face. But it was far too late. Justice had a name. Justice had a face. And when it began, she was only 14 years old. The best revenge isn't about defeating those who hurt you. It's about transforming that pain into something so powerful, so undeniable, that your very existence becomes a testament to resilience. Jasmine didn't just expose injustice. She turned her story into a beacon of hope for millions still fighting to be seen, heard, and treated with respect. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. Would you have the courage to do what Jasmine did? And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that prove one truth: dignity and wisdom will always triumph over arrogance and prejudice.